Good morning, colleagues. Good morning to the International Conference on Sustainable Agricultural Development and Regional Cooperation for Inclusive Growth in Central Asia. It is my great pleasure to be able to give this address. As you know, Central Asia is a region with a special importance for me, and I do regret not being able to join you personally in Tashkent. But I do hope that I will be able to come to the next conference in the region. The reason is, of course, COVID-19. COVID-19 has not only disrupted this conference and its organization, but has severely disrupted the global economy, jeopardized the well-being of billions of people, and raised the specter of a global food crisis. The IMF estimates that the global economy will shrink by more than 4.4% this year. This would be the deepest recession since the Second World War. Our own researchers at IFPRI have estimated that in the absence of strong interventions in developing countries, the number of people in extreme poverty would increase by up to 150 million people, and food insecurity will rise strongly as a consequence. The COVID-19 pandemic is a health crisis, but it's also an economic crisis and a food crisis. The food crisis results from a combination of an economic recession and the disruption of food systems. COVID-19 has exposed fragilities in food system. It has disrupted food systems, and especially in those parts of the food system which are labor-dense, labor-intensive, such as, for example, many of the fresh fruit and vegetable chains. The breakdown of supply chains due to the virus infection and a variety of policy restrictions has caused consumer prices to increase, while producer prices have fallen at the same time. So it has increased food security for both the urban and the rural poor, which is very different than as, for example, in the case of the food price spikes in the 2000s. IFPRI's research shows that the combined impact of economic recession and disruption caused by COVID-19 is especially detrimental for the poor. The poor have been acutely affected by lost or decreased incomes, as the pandemic has led to a severe economic recession in many countries. Poor people whose main asset is their physical labor have also suffered the most from the effects of the lockdown and their incapacity to gain incomes and lost employment. Our studies confirm that interruption of both international and internal rural-urban migration led to the fall in remittances with huge impacts on poverty. Impacts on food security are particularly strong for the weakest in our society, often women and children. This is globally the case, but it's also true in Central Asia. The COVID-19 pandemic has brought further uncertainty to the region by intensifying challenges which are already there due to increasing climate change effects, external shocks caused by unstable commodity prices, and disruptions of remittances and trade flows. For example, in Central Asia, remittances in Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan have declined by around 23%, 38% even, and 13% in the first 2 quarters of 2020 alone, compared to the same period in 2019. These are large effects. The World Bank estimates that an additional 1.5 to 2 million people in Central Asia will fall under the poverty line this year. Almost 50% of households in Tajikistan reduced their food consumption during this period. In Uzbekistan, exports have dropped by about 20%, and around 85% of small and medium businesses were forced to shut down by the end of March. But while the COVID-19 pandemic has affected all the countries, there is significant heterogeneity among the countries in Central Asia. For example, according to the latest IMF estimates, economic growth will decline significantly in the region on average, but the effects differ. Kazakhstan minus 2.7%, Kyrgyzstan minus 12% even, are expected to experience these strong declines. In Tajikistan and Uzbekistan, there we see that the growth has declined, but is still slightly positive. The COVID-19 pandemic has also affected the research world, our activities. It required us to adopt new ways to collect data, new ways to do analysis, and to communicate research and organize knowledge exchange. IFPRI is continuing its research activities and capacity strengthening and knowledge dissemination efforts, but in different ways. we have from the beginning of the pandemic heavily invested in a number of ways. We have launched a blog series very early on. We now have more than 50 blogs on our website discussing the impact of COVID-19 on food security, nutrition and poverty. We have organized many virtual events, almost more than 25. And in August, we launched an ebook, which basically combines a lot of the insights from the events and from the blog series and our analysis. All of these things, the blogs, the summary of the virtual events and the ebook are freely downloadable from our website. So I definitely encourage you to go and take a look there. Specifically on the research in Central Asia, IFPRI and local partners are examining the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on agriculture and food security. And one of the ways we do this is through phone surveys. This is used to collect evidence, to collect data on the impact of the health and economic crisis on rural households' welfare, on their diets, on their nutrition. Also to study the impact on agriculture and food value chains, and to study behavioral changes and coping mechanisms in households in response to the crisis, including changes in expenses, in dietary patterns, in decisions to migrate, and intra-household relationships. At the policy front, IFPRI has engaged in a number of studies and analyses to track government policy measures globally and in Central Asia in response to COVID. These policy measures have been adopted by many countries, and some common features also in Central Asia can be identified. These include features such as measures to prevent the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic, for example, restrictions on travel, lockdowns, measures to mitigate the impact on household welfare and food security, for example, unemployment support, tax waivers, etc., social protection measures, and measures to revive the economy, economic and financial stimulus, tax waiver for businesses again, etc. What we also notice is that in Central Asia there are several new policy developments in the region that require evidence-based analysis to get insights on their impact. For example, in Uzbekistan, the government is considering joining the Eurasian Economic Union. It has applied for membership in the WTO, and it has adopted a new and ambitious agri-food sector development strategy for 2020-2030. All these have important implications for transforming the food system, not just in Uzbekistan, but potentially throughout the region. So a careful assessment and an evidence-based assessment of the impacts on trade, welfare and growth is likely to be important. In all of this work, we don't work alone. We work with many other institutions. We collaborate with long-term partners in the regions. And I mention a few here. This includes the World Bank, the Eurasian Center for Food Security at Lomonosov, Moscow State University, IAMO, of course, the Westminster International University in Tashkent, the University of Central Asia in Bishkek, the Tajik Academy of Agricultural Sciences, SET Analytics Group in Dushanbe, and many other institutions. This conference, which is organized in partnership with the Ministry of Agriculture of the Republic of Uzbekistan, Tashkent State Economics University, IAMO, and again other partners, is also an indication of IFPRI's strong commitment to the region. There are many challenges ahead, and I do hope that during the next 3 days, the conference participants will discuss these pressing challenges, but also the opportunities that are there. I hope they will also focus on data-driven and evidence-based solutions, because that is crucial to support the sustainable agricultural development, food development, and inclusive growth in Central Asia. I wish you a wonderful conference.